All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this breakout session on winning at school. My name is Kanan Stevens, and I'm a co-founder of the Liberation of Education. I'm so pleased to be with you all tonight and to introduce our esteemed speaker, Steve Hargadon. Did I say that right, Steve?
Yeah, that's good.
Steve created one of the first modern social networks for teachers, Classroom 2.0, and runs large online conferences for teachers and librarians. Steve has done contract work, consulted with, or served on advisory boards for many organizations, including the U.S. Department of Education, Microsoft, Acer, Adobe, and the U.S. State Department, typically focusing on educational technology and social networking. His family includes his 4 children and his 5 grandchildren. Without further ado, please join me in warmly welcoming Steve Hargadon. It's all yours.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. I got to make it larger here to get all the full options. Give me a second. Okay, does that look okay?
Yep, we can see it. It looks great.
Awesome. So this is a 20-minute version of a 90-minute webinar or workshop that I do, helping students learn how to play and win the game of school. And it's based on the idea that there's actually an elephant in the room. And without going into kind of the deeper historical roots from the previous session, which I actually really agree with, somehow we are comfortable in our narrative storytelling about the institutions in our lives, telling stories that aren't actually the truth. And I'll say to people, what do banks do? And what's the story of what banks do? And what does the government do? And what's the story of what the government does? And I think we're built for storytelling. And so stories and narratives unite us, but they rarely represent the truth. And the elephant in the room for schooling is that it's not actually about empowering every learner. It's the story we tell, and it's a noble story. And it drives a lot of people. But I think the truth of it is that the elephant in the room is that school is a game. And it's a game that's designed to get you prepared for the work world. And if you hear echoes of Ivan Illich and Deschooling Society, they're definitely there for me. This idea that schooling is sort of a disguised version of preparing you to do the things that are necessary for school. So I've taken out a number of slides. You'll be able to see here sort of the larger outline of the longer workshop, and certainly feel free to email me or connect with me directly, and I'm glad to talk more about it. But I'm going to give a shortened version. And my argument is that school teaches us certain work skills that we would call virtues, but we have to realize that they're actually just sort of practical, conforming compliance characteristics. So schools teach us to follow directions, to make logical deductions, to read at a grade level, to recall information, to turn in assignments, to ask relevant questions, to be polite, essentially. But schools, intriguingly, because that's what they end up doing, also teach that kids aren't smart. I mean, my argument would be that the thing that schools teach best to most students is that they're not smart kids. Plato called this the noble lie. That we have to convince kids that they're gold, silver, brass, or bronze, because that's how society functions smoothly. But I have had conversations with people, largely in the service industry, where I ask about their schooling, and they'll actually start to cry. And the wounds from schooling can be incredibly deep. Right? So you're not smart, you have to cheat to get ahead, success is random, you didn't have the right circumstances, and that learning is boring. So something you can do if you're watching this either live or as a recording is to ask yourself, what do you ultimately want your student to learn in school? And then if you're a student watching this, you could ask yourself, you could say, this is my life. What do I want to become? How do I take school and turn it into me as the customer figuring out how to take school to my best advantage. And I recognize that often when I give this talk, I get these sort of blank stares from people, and I realize I'm speaking at a level that's so above our kind of current conception of schooling, which really does have inherent in it this sense of compliance and doing what you're told. When I tell people to take their education and actually turn it into what they want, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so there are some basic elements to the game of school. And I'd like to encourage you to make a list. You'll see my list, but make your own list. And if you can do it with the student, it's super helpful to actually make a list of, okay, what are the actual rules of the game? If you think you're playing basketball, but it's actually football, and you have you haven't been specific about the rules of winning, you're going to go out and you're going to have trouble. And you're going to think, I'm not good at this. So for me, I put it into 4 categories. I'm not going to spend too much time on the slides, but there are classroom rules, things you do. You show up, you work hard, you don't interrupt, you're polite, use respectful language, etc. I had a guy, this is all based on a survey I did of thousands of teachers. I got 600 detailed responses. And one teacher emailed back and said, I had a teacher who challenged me to wear a clean shirt to school every day. And he said, and it changed my life. And I was like, okay, yes, because it changes the perception the teacher has of you, and it changes your perception of yourself. And it's sort of an interesting basic thing, which largely families can help students to do and maybe is unspoken, but clearly makes a difference. Then there are sort of work rules to the game, right? You turn in all your assignments, you get it done on time, you give the teacher exactly what they want, you prepare, you get the easy points. And when I gave a talk about school to a conference that was held at Google's headquarters, some kids came up to me afterwards and they said, we're interns at Google. We're in that small group of kids that you say, have a good experience at school and become good learners. But we weren't good at school. We were good at the game. So they were good at this kind of stuff. They knew what to do to get the grades. And they were actually kind of in camaraderie with the other top students. And they would get together every week or two and they would talk about who's giving what grades and how everybody, what class you take at the community college to get extra credit. And I was so amazed to realize that was what was actually going on. So there are some study rules. A book I love is Mortimer Adler's How to Read a Book. And I recommend it all the time because if you don't know how to read a book, you're really at a disadvantage. And most teachers I know don't know how to read a book. And the short version is, if you don't treat a book like a good conversation, you're missing out. If you think you have to read from page 1 to the end, you're going to be bored. I don't sit down and talk to someone and let them talk to me for 3 or 4 hours. I get in a conversation. So it's a way of having a conversation with the book. And then there's health, right? Basic physical and mental health, getting enough sleep, eating well, setting personal goals, taking time off. This is so interesting, right? As adults, those of us who have careers that have allowed us to actually sort of self-direct, I don't work as hard every day as I do on other days, right? And sometimes I just need a complete break. And students don't have that. And you kind of need it. You need the ability to say, I'm not productive right now. I need to walk away. Okay, so then I call this next part, how to win friends and influence teachers. The game of school goes much better if you make friends with your teachers and you realize that they're human beings, that they have interests and likes, and you actually get to know them and you kind of make them part of your team, right? You want them to be interested in your success and you want help and understanding what to do and what are the classes to take and that kind of thing. And again, most students are afraid of developing this kind of a relationship. The families often of the stronger students have a culture built in of helping encourage this. And it's our kind of responsibility to help the kids who don't understand that, hey, this is a really valuable thing to do. We say that I'm gonna make a little bit of a provocative statement. It's not too provocative, but I think learning is individual, but school is a team sport. So as I develop competence as a learner, as a student develops competence as a learner, that doesn't come from group work, I don't think. I think it comes from the confidence that comes from actually getting good at something and deep dive studying and becoming a scholar and that rigor that was talked about, but the personal rigor. School is a team sport in the sense that you want a group of people who will help you accomplish that goal. And a lot of people don't understand this and a lot of teachers don't understand it. So I think it's really important that we sort of help students understand this is your own personal journey. We're on your team, but the learning is you, because that's the ultimate goal. Okay, next is the role of parents. One thing teachers tell me all the time is that the number one factor in a child's academic success is the family. And I think a lot of times they're deferring responsibility to the family. They'll say, "There's nothing I can do." The kid comes and they don't have good work habits and these sorts of things. But I think there's also a deeper truth there, which is that families that have cultures around learning and achievement and accomplishment and positive things help their kids get through the ups and downs. And when a family is not super functional, they don't. And I think it's important to recognize I don't feel like I displace the family ever, someone else's family, but I can help and supplement. And then I often see schools taking the role that the family could take. So instead of having parenting classes or helping parents become better at making food at home or doing the kinds of things in a community that you would do to help the parents, they try and help the students and ignore the family and the parents. So I think this is a really interesting piece here. And most everybody has a story of their own learning where they'll say, "Oh, it was this teacher who did this. Someone believed in me. Someone challenged me." That role of a caring adult is so critical. So in terms of the role of parents, you're welcome to screenshot any of this, but I'm going to say the bottom four for me are the most important, which is you kind of have to get your act together, meaning you can't require your kids to achieve and accomplish if you aren't actually modeling the very thing that you want your children to do. So it's really easy to kind of get out of that mode and just be kind of angry or structured or frustrated or dictatorial around homework or assignments and the like. And rather than modeling learning and then helping coach a student to become a learner, you're focused on the tangible things that make you nervous. And so you make your child nervous. Mentoring learning, of course, I like to think of the parent as a coach, as an enlightened coach. And as they get older, you're doing more coaching and less parenting. It's important to motivate and to find ways to motivate learning to take place. And then it's about overcoming your own stories or demons. A lot of adults haven't really gotten certain aspects of their lives in order. And so rather than get them in order and feel comfortable and confident, helping their child or the student, they're quick to anger and they get a temper and they're demanding. And I find that in my life, where I have the most confidence, I'm the most gracious kind of helper to someone else. I tell the story of Caesar Milan, who's the dog whisperer, and it comes to the house where the family's having trouble with the dog, and he has to find a way to tell them it's not the dog, right? You need to learn some things about how a dog works to be a better dog owner. And for the most part, it's not the student. I mean, students have difficulties, there's no question, but caring, thoughtful adults can do a really good job of helping almost any student. And in a lot of cases, this is a hard thing to say, but I think we have children teaching children and children raising children, and we need to kind of step up and do better than that. Okay, so then smart strategy. So out of these 600 detailed replies, I have this whole series of strategies, but I thought it'd be fun to look at a few of them with a reminder that for a student, it is their education. So taking charge is super critical, and we're sometimes reluctant to let them do that, but it's a core part of their growth. And in the great book Teen 2.0, Robert Epstein talks about how in most cultures, kids became adults at the age of 11 or 12. And we so infantilize our students that many of them just never really get into adulthood until maybe their mid-20s. I'll often ask people, what percentage of students do you think graduate from high school as competent adults, hold a job, start a family, live on their own? And people will kind of laugh. They'll do that recognition laugh, that nervous laugh. And usually the answer I get is about 5%. And that there's something sort of profoundly dysfunctional about that. Okay, so here are some of the advanced rules. Choosing classes. So I always tell students, choose your classes based on the teacher first. Teachers don't teach subjects, they teach people. And you want them teaching you. Ask other students about who the best teachers are. Ask the parents of former students what teachers they really appreciated. Okay, this is a really big ask of students in the mindset of students not being capable, but in the mindset of students being capable, yeah, Go talk to your friends' parents, and they have older siblings, and what teachers did they love? Ask the teachers that you like which other teachers to take classes from. Um, and often it's just a case of choosing the more serious classes. We had a daughter who took AP World History, and it kicked her butt. It was really hard, but she grew so much, and it was her choice, and she did it, and we helped her get through it. And she now looks back on that as this seminal experience, and she's becoming a teacher herself. More strategies. Build a student team. Find other students that you're not just taking a break with, but you actually work together to help each of you do better in school. Find a real teacher mentor, not just your assigned counselor. Learn how to thoughtfully advocate for yourself. This is really hard for a lot of adults, so it's sometimes hard to teach, but it's really important. Be brutal with social media. Minimize it. I've noticed that when our kids were given more encouragement and agency and freedom, they chose less social media. And I think it was in part because they didn't need it as much, and so weren't looking for the quick hits. Get a part-time job. I think this is critical. I encourage students to get a job. It'll make a difference for you. Yeah, it's more time, and you feel like it's going to cut into homework time, but no, you really need that sense of experience and doing something different and understanding how the world works. Think about community colleges. Sometimes take a day off of schoolwork to de-stress, learn how to live a balanced life. It doesn't make any sense that we would expect students to be under such radically heavy pressure, especially with the incumbent suicide rates. For what? Right? If they're not going to actually be able to figure out how to lead a balanced life. And I think in a lot of cases that represents us as adults not knowing how to be balanced, and so not knowing how to teach our children to be balanced. Make an actual list of how to leave school psychologically healthy. And at the end of your term or semester, reflect, do some journaling. What did you learn? What didn't you learn? Which is sort of part of this idea that you're going to see coming up of making a plan. Here's some master level things that we learned from these teachers. Do everything you can do to develop a rare but valuable skill. Find problems in the industry that you're interested in, that the industry you're interested in is facing, and then start thinking and talking and working on those problems. Approach every class assignment with your own personal agenda and goals. Build a personal learning network around your niche outside of school. Take time regularly to do your own long-term goals and review them. Make a school and personal learning plan. If you're a parent of a student, sit down, no matter what age they're in after junior high, and say, what do you want to accomplish this year? What do you want to accomplish in school? What do you want to accomplish outside of school? Because there's things that schools don't teach that you want to learn. Right? Balancing a checkbook, learning to handle money, managing credit, job applications and interviews, getting and keeping a job, buying a car, living independently. These are things that we want to encourage students to learn to do, and they're not going to learn to do in school. Okay, more things that schools don't teach: life success skills. And I'm not going to read through this list because we're short on time, but there are really important life skills that get thrown to the wayside when we think of school in the way that we currently think of school, or at least in the terms of our larger cultural conceptions of schooling. There are a lot of other ways to learn: vacations and trips, gap years, jobs, volunteering, starting a small business. Interestingly enough, my dad was dean of admissions at Stanford, dean of admissions at Princeton. He was chairman of the college board. One great lesson I took from that was they work really hard to look through applications to see if there's evidence of a student being engaged. We spend a lot of time telling students to mimic or to replicate the evidence of engagement without actually being engaged. Oh, you need to have an internship, and you need to have this on your college application. You need to have that. Well, no. What you actually need to do is to find something that engages you enough that you can reflect that in your college application. And this is a great tragedy to me because, again, it's this way in which we as adults gaming the system, we think, are teaching our kids to live at a surface level rather than a deep level. So my reflection would be, what do you think is really winning at the game of school? And I'll let you put that in the comments. I haven't been able to look at the comments yet, but I'll do that right now. And I'll stop there and allow for questions or comments.
While you're looking through the comments, I had a couple questions first. So how do you suggest guiding children to find their passion and make their plan? Like, what's the best way to do that?
So interestingly enough, I think this requires one of the things that's hardest for us to give, which is time. right? So if I am spending time with my child and we're going and doing things and we're trying out activities, we go like our son loves rock climbing and outdoors kind of stuff, and that's not who I am. But finding ways to see that and then kind of talk through how to take advantage of those opportunities, I think is really critical. So I know it's not the answer you might have been looking for, but I think it's actually taking time. And if you have a parenting partner or a spouse and you're saying, okay, so, what do you think he's interested in or she's interested in? And, what could we do and how could we help and how could we encourage? And I really firmly believe that children have temperaments, right? We're born differently. I'm a lot like my dad in some ways and my mom in other ways. So it's also a case of sort of looking at your child's temperament and saying, okay, they're shy. So how do I help that? Or you know, they're the life of the party. So what things are they going to like? I think that's really important to kind of do that sort of deep reflection and kind of get to the next level as a parent and say, okay, how do I help a child who has this set of characteristics, which may actually be different than mine?
Yeah, that's really good. I have 5 kids, and every single one, they're so different. And so trying to take the time to have those conversations and then repeating those conversations because kids change all the time too.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to ask you a question. It's a rhetorical question because I don't expect you to answer, but don't you think we often trade time for financial success? Meaning, in a lot of ways, I think we're going to look back on our lives, or our children or grandchildren look back on our lives and say, what were you doing? Why didn't you just live modestly and do all of these things that you knew you could do? We're often trapped by all of the sort of the toys and the things that we want to do and the trips and the amusements, the streaming videos. And it's like, okay, so if we really wanted to, we could choose to live much simpler lives. And wouldn't that be healthier for our kids? I know that's hard. I mean, it's like so profoundly hard, but I think it's true.
Yeah. I was very blessed. I'm the oldest of 11 kids, and my parents stayed married to each other. My dad worked, my mom stayed home and homeschooled us. And we had, a very meager life, but I value it so much. I'm very, very thankful that my parents that they lived like that and taught us in
Yeah,
that way.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I did a lot of family history, and I went back and looked at. I discovered this treasure trove of one side of the family, the Faust side of my family, and there were all these listings of the families, and it's like the dad was a good Christian and a thoughtful father, and
Mhm.
none of them said what they did for a living. Now they
Wow.
were probably farmers. I mean, they probably lived there a period of time where everybody just sort of did what they did, but it was still intriguing to me that they defined themselves through their relationship with their families rather than through the things that they did.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Um, so I've been fascinated by your talk. Is this in a book? Have you written a book yet?
I'm, I'm doing that working on forever book. Yeah, no, I'm thinking of doing it as a PDF that's freely available because
Wow.
I don't really want to have to go through the process of thinking about how am I going to make this successful and publish and everything. And I've just not ever done it. And I feel like, okay, part of my problem is I've been caught in that same trap, right? Which is, okay, how do I become the next big success? I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I don't. Maybe I'll just, do a Creative Commons version of it that's not super long, that has all this material, and then let people give me feedback and talk about it. And then if enough people like it and it gets passed around and somebody decides they want to publish it, great. But
Yeah,
you can email me and I'll put you on the list, and you can
I
bug
would.
me. You can say, Steve, hey, come on, get it done.
I've been bugging my mom to write her story. I'm like, Mom, you have so much. You just need to sit down and do it. And yeah,
I
one of
worked with
these.
a good friend who was in the same boat. He had been super successful in his life, like more successful than most any of us will ever know. And he wanted to write his autobiography. And he asked me if I would help him. And I said, that's not what I do. It's not really my thing. But why don't you tell me the stories of your life and I'll record them and we'll transcribe them. And then I did like 60 hours of interviews with him. His
Wow.
parents, his grandparents, what life was like growing up, all this kind of, and essentially he produced this just sort of beautiful book called The Story of My Life, which had all of these stories, all of the photos, everything. It was like, okay, that, he felt like that was his legacy to his kids. He said,
Oh,
I'm giving my kids my view of how you live life through the stories of what I've experienced. And they changed me. Hearing his stories changed me. So if you need any encouragement there, I would encourage you, just get a tape recorder out and do the stories piece, because I think in a lot of ways that actually is what we want.
yeah, that's amazing. I think there's a program called Story Worth that has something
Yes.
similar. So who
my
knows?
daughter gave that to me.
And you haven't done it yet.
I haven't done it.
Okay, well, I have a friend who has that program, and he just talks into his notes. So
Mhm.
he'll go for like an hour-long walk every morning. He just
Yeah.
talks into his notes, answering the question, then emails it to himself, edits it, and sends it off. So maybe that'll work for you.
Yeah, no,
I'll,
no. And I did part of it. We have a daughter who served a Mormon mission.
yeah.
And so she was gone for 18 months. And
Wow.
so every week I wrote one of my stories. And so that they're there. I just haven't like collected them. And
Yeah. We do have a question over here. Peggy is asking, have you written or recorded anything like this that would be great for a student entering college? I have a grandson who really needs this information. So maybe she wants the PDF too.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, Peggy and I go way back.
Oh,
Um,
good.
Peggy is one of my favorite people in the whole world.
Oh,
So, Peggy, I haven't done that. I actually bought the domain name Game of College, thinking like Game of School, Game of College. I don't feel as qualified, but if you want to prompt me and help me, let me get the Game of School one done. And then maybe we could look at kind of, there is a book on college called Hacking Your Education. And if you email me, Peggy, or anybody else, I'll give you the name of the guy. But he actually introduced me to this whole concept of figuring out what you care about and then making your college experience map to what you want to do. So no matter what the prerequisites are, the courses of study, the books to be read, taking all of those and mapping them into his plan for what he wanted to learn. And I thought, that's brilliant.
yeah.
Right? Why don't we do that? Well, I don't think we feel a sense of agency in a lot of cases. We don't feel like we're the customer. We feel like, in a lot of ways, oh, the school will choose me. And if I'm lucky, a good school will choose me. And then when I go, I'm just taking the classes they tell me to take. And I don't really feel this sense of, oh, I'm actually in charge here.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, she found it.
Yes.
Hacking Your
No,
Education.
it's not that book. That's Dale Stevens, but it's another one. I can't remember the guy's name, but I will. I'll find it. Anybody wants to know, they can email me.
Yeah. Um, we had Michelle was asking, and then I kind of have a similar question too. So when you're helping kids to be motivated and kind of choose their education, how do you do that when they don't want to do the math or write the papers? Like, how do you motivate them, but they still need to do the basics? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I found that boys really get the concept of a game.
Mm,
In a lot of ways, they're used to playing games. And I've had these random conversations where I've overheard a parent lecturing a child, and I've come over and sort of gently introduced myself and said, hey, I'm Steve, and this is what I do. And, can I ask you some questions? And when I introduced this idea that school is a game, the boys really get it.
hmm,
And so it's like, okay, you don't have to be a math whiz, but let's figure out how to get you through math so you feel
sure.
successful, because you don't want to not feel successful.
Yeah.
And it may be hard for you, but here are the options. You can take a lower level of math. You can do this. We can get you a tutor. What would you like to do? I I don't want that to sound easier than it is,
Yeah.
but parenting isn't easy,
Yeah.
right? So that there are moments where you're saying, okay, so this is a struggle. I'm not quite sure what to do. I do really believe that a lot of the problems that students face are because we knowingly infantilize them.
Mm,
And so if we say, hey, within boundaries, you have choices, and let's help you figure things out. And, math, you don't want to do math, but let's get you through math so you can do the other things you want to do, and we'll help you figure it out.
yeah. I love that. That's amazing. Well, it says our time has ended. I mean, if people want to stay on, you're welcome to. Um, but this has been so helpful for me and very encouraging. And I love the practicality of it too. I love the list. So I'm gonna be pestering you for that PDF for sure.
Yeah, please do. I need the pestering.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Steve. It was great to meet you.
You too. Thank you.
Yeah. Good night.